Question 5. The table provided shows the individual components of the chi-square test of association/independence for a study done on amount of time spent at a computer and whether or not a person wears glasses. Which of the following statements is supported by the information in this table? Okay. All right, choice A. Above average screen time individuals wore glasses much less often than expected. Average screen time individuals wore glasses much less often than expected. Below average screen time individuals wore glasses about as often as expected. You can't determine this without the original observed counts. The chi-square statistic for this test is about 3.5. Okay, so the one I can eliminate for sure is E. Okay. The chi-square statistic is going to be the sum of all these components, or we call them contributions in class. Both terms are used kind of interchangeably. All right. I can tell because that one already is 8.7, so it has to sum up to something more than 3.5. Okay, so I want you to notice that all these values are positive, and that's because when we find the components, we do observed minus expected squared. Okay, so the fact that it's positive isn't really telling us whether a value was greater than expected or less than expected. It's just kind of telling us the net difference. It's like the net difference. Okay, so all I can really say is that for people with above average screen time, because these are large values, the observed counts were different than expected. I couldn't tell you whether it was higher or lower. Okay. Also, because these values are, much bigger than 0, I could tell you that for people with below average screen time, that the observed counts were different than expected. Again, I couldn't tell you whether it was higher or lower. Okay. But because these values are so small, right, they're close to 0, I would be able to tell you that people with average screen time had observed counts that were close to their expected counts, right? Because those contributions are almost 0, right? So meaning there wasn't really much difference between the observed and expected counts there. Okay, so going through the remaining choices, above average screen time individuals, so these ones right here, wore glasses much less often than expected. I can't say for sure. It might be less often, but it might be more often, right? The components doesn't tell us whether it was greater or lower. Okay. B, average screen time individuals wore glasses much less often than expected. Okay. I would say no to that. I would say that they wore glasses about as often as expected. Remember, those contributions are close to 0. Okay, choice C. Below average screen time individuals wore glasses about as often as expected. Well, about as often as expected. I wouldn't say that, right? Because those values aren't that close to 0, right? They're 3 and 2. So yeah, I don't like that one. No. All right. D. You can't determine this without the original observed counts. Yeah, right. I like that one. To figure out whether something was higher or lower than expected, you need to actually see the observed counts and the expected counts. You can't just figure it out from the components.